Hello, welcome along to episode 215, would you believe it, of Adventures in Pop. My name's Simon Jacobs. I'm still gloating because I've got a plaque here that says I've got 100,000 subscribers. Well, I've actually got about 112,000, I think. And if you're one of them, thank you. And if you're not, I mean, what the hell? It's free and it's nice. And that's all I can say about it. Now, today, I want to talk about something reasonably frivolous, really. I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. Let's talk some music industry nonsense. And I want to talk about songs that everybody loves. There's a kind of consensus that it's a classic, wonderful track, and for some reason, I can't bear it. So I'm just being super contrary today. And when I was thinking about this, because there are a few songs that come up all the time that I kind of go, oh God, why do people cling on to, loving this song? And I often wonder how much is the consensus of the crowd, and people just sort of go along with it and think, oh, well, they like it, I suppose I ought to like it too. Because I think there's quite a lot of that goes on. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking, I could choose things like, well, look, when you go back to the 90s, there was a little spate of us in the UK having number one singles that went on being number one pretty much forever. I mean, I think they have recently stopped being number one, but I'm thinking of, do you remember Wet, 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 Love Is All Around? That was number one for, I think, 15 or 16 long, dreary weeks. I Will Always Love You, Whitney Houston. Number one for at least forever. And what was the other one? Oh, Bryan Adams. Everything I do it for you, etc. Okay, now I could choose those because they're not great records, but to be honest, I don't loathe them. They just, well, maybe the Wet Wet one I probably do, but they were just massively sort of overrated. They somehow captured a moment, and I don't really know why. But I'm going to park those to one side because in a way they're too well known. And I wanted to kind of go for something a bit more interesting, although to be honest, you'll be the judge of that, just because, those ones had eons at number one and some of these ones less so. So I've just got a top five of songs that everybody loves, but I can't bear them. Are you ready? Let's crack into it then. Number five, I'm doing this in order, obviously. I love a countdown. Who doesn't love a countdown? Number five, Karma Chameleon by Culture Club. We're going right back to 1983. Second number one for Culture Club, because obviously a year earlier they'd already had number one with Do You Really Want to Hurt Me? Which I have to say, here and now, I think is a lovely record. Beautifully sung, beautifully produced. A fantastic kind of, debut. That launched Culture Club and Boy George in particular into the kind of stratosphere. And I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day. It's hard to remember now just how huge Culture Club were. And it was a rather brief period of hugeness. And, I think it would be true to say that, Boy George was in many ways the architect of his own downfall. But it was, they were sensationally, globally enormous for a short period of time. And in that period of time, basically, I think they made one good album. And Karma Chameleon is probably their best known song. And I just think it's awful. I don't like the tune. I don't know what it's about. I've got no idea what's going on. It had a silly video that was annoying, and it was number one for at least 6 weeks. There'll probably be people out there who adore this song. I thought of all of those really interesting early Culture Club hits that were mostly really good. I'm talking about Church of the Poison Mind, Time, Clock of the Heart, even Victims, even though that was, a bit bloated. Karma Chameleon, not a good track at all. Okay, you can see where this is going. I'm just going to lose... my 13,000 subscribers we reduced to about 4 by the time I finish this. Okay, so that's number five. Number four, maybe a little controversial. My number four is Into the Groove by Madonna. Now, Into the Groove was an important Madonna song. It was one of the songs that really put her on the road to kind of superstardom. It was a major kind of leap forward in 1985. So she'd already released the track Like a Virgin, and Into the Groove was the song that she performed. I think it was sort of debuted at Live Aid in the summer of 1985. I remember being slightly horrified that she'd used the Live Aid moment to promote her new single, but then, maybe I was just getting to know Madonna then, and I shouldn't have been horrified because, you know, there was more of that to come later. But Into the Groove by Madonna was a real stepping stone for her. It took her from, interesting new star into kind of superstardom fairly quickly. And of all of those 80s Madonna records, and there were so many that were quite kind of classic, like Holiday, Borderline, Papa Don't Preach, True Blue. You can go on, La Isla Bonita, and so many more. That Into the Groove for me is the one that really doesn't hit the standard. And she did have a stand. There were good pop records in the 80s. I mean, I think it fell off a little bit later, obviously, in the 90s, although I still think Ray of Light's a good record. But Into the Groove is the one Madonna track that I would be very happy never to hear again in my whole life. So that is my number 4 song that everyone loves that I hate. I don't really hate it. I just would be quite happy never to hear it again. But then I get into 3 tracks that I think I probably really do hate. I can't bear them. And number 3, we're stranded in the mid 80s here, so apologies for youngsters who don't even know which records I'm talking. Go and find them. Go and find them on Spotify or Apple or wherever, and you tell me if you think these are remarkable, great classic records. And my number 3 is "Money for Nothing" by Dire Straits, from the album Brothers in Arms, which spent, I think, 1985 and 1986. I think for 2 successive years it was the best-selling album of the year, and it's a pretty dull album, and it was at the time that CDs were exploding, and I think for me what I thought was happening here, and I was working in Outprice Records back then, I thought that basically people were buying CD players and they're thinking, what do I need to put on my CD player? And the CD that everyone opted for was Brothers in Arms, Dire Straits, and utterly dull but beautifully produced. It was, in that respect, it was a work of art. It was a lovely, gorgeous production. But I felt like people were buying Brothers in Arms by Dire Straits, who were the people who weren't that interested in music, but they just wanted to have the 1 or 2 things that would sound fabulous on their new, rather posh CD player. So it kind of coincided with that whole moment. And maybe the worst track on the album, "Money for Nothing," I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the video, couldn't bear anything about it. I'd probably reach for the radio if it came on the radio and just turn it down or switch channels. It's that bad. Leaving us with 2. So we're going into the 90s for my number 2, back to the 90s. It's interesting, I've got 80s, 90s, and then finally I will end with the 70s. But 90s for my number 2. My number 2 is the debut hit single by Spice Girls. Now look, Wannabe. I still can't understand why it was even the smallest amount of a hit. And again, don't get me wrong, I think, later on in the Spice Girls musical pantheon, they had 2 albums, basically, didn't they? Two reasonable albums. I think they made some good singles, a hell of a lot better than Wannabe, which I was too old, probably. I was probably too old, a bit male, and I didn't understand it. And I still don't, really. And I think it's a dreadful, horrible mess of a song. And as I say, later I think that Spice Up Your Life, To Become One, Stop. I mean, these are good tracks. And Wannabe obviously was the one that launched them stratospherically in one go, and I absolutely fail to understand why. And there it is, my number two most loved but I hate song, which brings me to my number one. I'm being slightly pestered here by my lovely Labrador. I think she disagrees with some of my choices, so I might have to keep my voice down as we get to number one. My number one is so contentious that I remember, oh God, maybe 20 years ago or so, I remember doing some training. I was running a workshop. We don't need to go into, why and how. I was running a workshop with a whole bunch of people about management and management skills, stuff like that, which is kind of what I used to do. And somehow we got into, what's the best songs that have been made? What's our favourite song ever in the world ever? Amongst a whole bunch of random people I didn't know at all. And a few people mentioned this particular track, and I think I made probably an unpleasant noise. I might have exhaled, and I said something like, "Oh my goodness, but overrated, load of old nonsense." I was almost thrown out. I almost had to resign on the spot. It was almost like I'd done something really bad and I had to apologise. It was like against royal protocol. My number one song that everyone loves, but I really can't bear it. Imagine by John Lennon. Am I the only one who doesn't like Imagine by John Lennon? I think it's dreadful. It's got a kind of childlike melody, and it's one of those songs which is kind of curious because I think people misunderstand it completely and think it's a beautiful song about peace on earth. Well, it's not really. It's a song about having no possessions and being sort of stripped of your assets. It's a song about I guess, being closer to some kind of spirituality through not owning stuff. And look, and I get that, but oh my goodness, the pious nature of this track and the way that people adored it, even though the melody is rubbish, and I don't think most people really understand what the song's about. It's a little bit like, Every Breath You Take by the Police being played at people's weddings when actually it's a song. It's an unpleasant and kind of rather dark song about stalking. So I feel a little bit the same about Imagine. Imagine is not, imagine let's all be really happy and have peace on earth. It's a bit more complex and strange than that, but it doesn't make it a good song. I'm really sorry. And let me be very clear. I loved some of John Lennon's post-Beatles output. I loved Number 9 Dream, Mind Games, whatever gets you through the night. Some of those tracks were really, really good, and I bought some of those as singles. But Imagine there was no song called Imagine. That would be fine with me. I probably better leave it there before I, dig a deep hole and carry on digging. So I would just say, I'll be back very shortly to talk about a new Goldhawk Foxes track, which is out next week. And it's tremendously good. That'll be out next Friday. So I'll be back before then to tell you all about it and to give you another instalment from the craziness of the music industry. Thank you so much for watching. Mwah. Bye.